Dramatic shakeup. The Trump administration has torched a 30-year-old trade agreement that slapped a 17% tariff on fresh tomatoes from Mexico.
The U.S. government announcing a new 17% tariff on most fresh Mexican tomatoes.
A new policy kicks in today, making way for a 21% price hike on.
The border was busiest in the early hours of the day. Trailers were lined up for inspection, motors were rumbling, and the air was filled with the cadence of trade that carried tiny towns along with it. The quiet now is more painful than any sound. Farmers watch years of labor pass them by, product wilts in the sun, and loaded trucks wait with nowhere to go. What started out as a disagreement on paper now affects people and agriculture, causing tension in livelihoods. Canada is no longer involved. The conflict has grown into something far more than commerce, and Mexico is gaining ground. How long till the system fails entirely? And when all is said and done, what will remain? Citing pesticide residues and persistent quality concerns, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency put its decision in the exact wording of legislation. On paper, it appeared to be a standard oversight. The kind of policy that rarely sparks much discussion and is buried in technical jargon. However, a well-considered choice that had little to do with food safety was hidden beneath the formality. Agricultural power was purposefully redirected throughout North America. A change in the market that surprised thousands of farmers in the United States. In less than 48 hours, the once vibrant border crossings ceased to exist. At the Peace Bridge, nearly 150 truckloads of California tomatoes stood idle because they were not allowed to enter Canada. At the Ambassador Bridge, 89 more shipments came to a standstill, refrigeration units humming as their worth diminished hour by hour. These were not merely figures from a government study. They represented the $340 million yearly flow of income that provided for 2,400 farming households in the United States. The brittle economies of tiny towns, rural hospitals, school funding, and mortgages were all made possible by that money. The lifeline had been severed with a single decision. The punch hurt much more because of the timing. Just a few weeks prior, Canada had concluded $180 million deals with Ontario and British Columbia greenhouse farmers. Fast-tracked and fully funded domestic facilities were constructed to replace about the same amount of tomatoes that were previously imported from California. There was no mistaking the message. The U.S. supply was no longer necessary. Tom Richardson, a farmer outside of Fresno who has been in the industry for over 30 years, put it simply. The crop's quality wasn't the issue. The issue was that an alternative had already been obtained by Canada. In a broader withdrawal from American agriculture, that one action was the first domino effect. Another change was occurring 2,000 meters south as Californian farmers attempted to withstand the impact. Instead of observing the consequences, Mexico took advantage of the opportunity to make progress on the international scene. What transpired was not your typical growth. European agribusiness heavyweights, seeking efficiency, dependability, and new partners for decades to come, organized the $12 billion investment boom. The front lines of such change were Sinaloa, Sonora, and Baja California. Over 70% of the billions invested went directly into hydroponic farming and sophisticated greenhouses, which ensured consistent production throughout the year while consuming almost 40% less water than the conventional techniques that dominated U.S. farms. By funding new ports, roadways, and storage facilities intended for smooth international distribution, an additional $3 billion reinforced the foundation of logistics. The remainder went toward research, training, and education, giving Mexico an edge through the development of a highly qualified labor force and an innovative culture. Agriculture in America had been gradually declining. Many were taken aback by the rapidity. Mexico's new partners built on their existing capabilities and scaled them at an astounding rate, whereas agricultural revolutions often take decades. In just 8 months, high-quality Mexican tomatoes were already available in Europe at prices that were about 25% less than those of American exports. The importance was clearly emphasized by Maria Elena Vasquez, an economist at the University of Guadalajara. Mexico positioned itself as a reliable and less expensive supplier at the exact moment that U.S. agriculture was losing credibility overseas. After years of being irritated by American delays, European purchasers immediately looked south. That change made America's position in the world's food markets vulnerable. The impact extended beyond trade figures and export contracts. The consequences has a human cost in farmland villages in California. One glaring example was Watsonville. Once employing hundreds, the processing plant was now dark. Trucking companies reduced to skeleton workers after making their name on transporting produce across the border. Repair shops, fertilizer dealers, and even the cafes where truckers paused for food had trouble keeping their doors open. The process is known as the multiplier effect by economists. Almost $2 go from the community for every $1 lost at the farm gate. In plainer terms, the locals call it ruin. In farming-based counties, unemployment increased by over 30%. Facilities for processing were just half full. Families that had occupied the land for many centuries started to move away in pursuit of security. The losses were not just financial. Enrollment in schools and agricultural areas fell precipitously, causing districts to cancel programs and combine. Superintendent Janet Morrison talked about the anguish of seeing long-standing families relocate in Delano. With every student leaving, funds decreased and resources shrank. Hospitals did the same thing. As patient numbers declined and unpaid invoices mounted, rural medical clinics, already under stress, cut back on services. In just 6 months, property values in California's farmland belt fell by about 20%, dragging entire communities down. Down with them. What started out as a disagreement about tomatoes turned out to be a larger struggle for control of the agriculture industry. Food was no longer solely considered a commodity. It had evolved into a strategic tool linked to both international influence and national security. The European Union had learned the price of relying too much on one supply after being traumatized by its dependence on Russian energy. Europeans saw more than just a trade agreement as Mexico provided a reliable agricultural partner while U.S. exports struggled. They witnessed security and resiliency. Brussels analysts put it simply. America's dominance was based on reliability and trust. Alternatives were attractive once such attributes were questioned. Pesticide rules were not the only reason for Canada's rejection. Reducing exposure to an untrustworthy source was a deliberate choice. There was more to Mexico's ascent than just supplying tomatoes. Restructuring food supply chains that have been unaltered for decades was the focus. What comes next is where the danger is. What will happen to wheat, soy, or corn if tomatoes can experience a setback of this magnitude? The world as well as the nation are fed by these crops. And now everyone watching can see the vulnerabilities. The divide has grown even further as a result of technology. The new facilities in Mexico are not only bigger but also more intelligent. Sensors installed in greenhouses monitor water, light, and soil in real time. While predictive models foresee market demand weeks in advance, automated systems make adjustments automatically. There is a level of accuracy in harvest planning that traditional farming cannot equal. There is no denying the efficiency gains. A single ton of tomatoes produced by American growers uses almost 3,000 gallons of water. Hydroponic systems in Mexico use less than 2,000. Automation reduces labor expenses by over 50%. In the United States, crops are protected against the climatic danger that might ruin entire seasons. This discipline was once dominated by American colleges, but advancement has been halted by years of underfunding and sluggish approval procedures. On the other hand, Mexican industries have directly benefited from the introduction of the best systems from Chinese and European technology businesses. As a result, American agriculture is lagging behind due to a growing technological disparity. The issue was explained by Dr. Patricia Williams, who left a research position in California to work in Europe. She claimed that although there are advancements, adoption in the U.S. is hampered by bureaucracy and antiquated procedures. The same developments are already changing farming south of the border. Mexico's resurgence is being fueled by the same factors that once propelled American leadership. Distribution itself has become a liability. The infrastructure seems out of scale and antiquated, having been constructed for a world that required American produce. Trucking fleets, railroads, and processing facilities were built for volumes that are no longer there. As facilities operate at capacity, costs per cargo increase, further decreasing the competitiveness of exports. Trucking businesses in Sahan, close to cross-border trade, report losses of over 60%. Due to high maintenance expenses, rail lines intended for significant agricultural traffic are currently underutilized. Supermarkets that are sensitive to customer demand and supply have quickly adjusted. Food from Mexico now fills shelves that originally held food from California. Retailers adhere to a consistent and reasonably priced supply. And that stability is currently located south of the border. Customers who demand the greatest quality at the lowest price put ongoing pressure on regional grocery chains. And the transformation is accelerated by that pressure. Furthermore, when a single choice changes the course of a whole industry, American tomato producers are seeing how brittle decades of market relationships can be. Families have relied on the steady cross-border trade for generations, frequently taking out loans against the assurance that the harvest will be sold each year. Almost instantly, that certainty fell apart. Predictability has long been the foundation of agricultural finance. Farmers operated within those reliable cycles, and banks made loans based on the presumption of stable markets. Those presumptions disappeared when Canada banned American tomatoes. The extent of the harm is seen in the Federal Reserve's Agricultural Loan Survey. Since the moratorium, loan delinquencies have increased by 78% in tomato-producing regions, and in just 8 months, bankruptcy filings have increased by 45%. Since many smaller farmers just leave behind land that held their family's heritage because they cannot afford the legal fees, these numbers fall short of capturing the entire scope. Previously regarded as a secure option, banks now want collateral that most families are unable to supply, severing the final means of survival. The story behind the stopped tomato trucks at border crossings is even more extensive. The decision made by Canada has exposed the vulnerability of American agricultural dominance. The losses are enormous. The loss of $340 million in export earnings. Over 24,000 farming families are in danger. Bankruptcies are up 45%, loan delinquencies are up 78%, and agricultural unemployment is up 34%. Beyond the numbers, however, is the true tragedy. Land that was part of their legacy is being abandoned by families. Talented employees are departing for other chances. That concludes today. Subscribe and hit like, and I'll see you in the next.